Welcome to Fostering Bridges, a podcast dedicated to uplifting, supporting, and empowering foster, adoptive, and kinship parents.
But today I am interviewing Ruth Babel. Ruth, good morning. How are you this morning?
I'm well, and you?
I'm doing good. This is take two for us. I appreciate you trying the other day, but we had some internet technology issues, so we're starting all over here. So thanks for coming back.
No worries.
Um, well, all right. And I learned, I was shocked the other day, so I can't fake how shocked I was to
Okay.
find out that you have had 88 children through your home in a
Yes.
dozen years. Is that about right? No,
About a
20.
dozen, yeah. A little bit less because we actually stopped fostering for a while, so we weren't actually having new cases, but yes.
Wow. So, I mean, foster parent extreme in a
I don't
sense.
know.
That is among the highest numbers I've ever heard. I've heard people hit 50 and we hit about 20, but 88. So, before we get into all of them, tell us how did it start? How did you get into foster care? What was the promptings there and how'd you know you were supposed to do it?
Well, okay. I'll try to keep it short. It started with our it started with our oldest son. When we were in Japan, Matthew was we were lived in Japan as active duty military. And so we were there, and Matthew, his first word was cuckoo clock, his second word was ball. And so he always had a ball with him everywhere, and he was about 15 months, and we were out at a park, and was carrying his little red ball, and he threw it at towards a group of Japanese men. I could tell they were homeless, and they were sleeping off their um, excitement or entertainment or must-haves from the night before.
The nice way to put it.
Well, and he didn't necessarily see all that. He was, his heart was, I want to play ball, and there's somebody there that's on my level, so I'm going to throw him a ball.
Hmm.
So he threw his ball, and one of the men snapped his fingers and gave a command. They all got up and woke up, and one picked up their trash, and one went to the bathroom. Then they took turns washing their faces and all kind of coming back. And then for hours Matthew rolled his ball and just kind of it was like, I have no idea what he was gibbering because Matthew didn't speak a whole lot of anything, but he, I can only imagine, hey, want to play with me? And I had that moment, that I was seeing the other women take their children away and kind of move off. And I was like, oh, what international offense am I creating by talking to these men that society says less than, they're, the least of these, they're the less. And that verse in Matthew 25:40, that whatever you've done to the least of these, you've done to me.
Hmm.
And so I was like, okay, it's my opportunity. This may be the only Jesus I get to see, how I get to be the hands and the feet. And so my job at that point, I realized as a parent, is to shepherd his heart, to follow God's heart, not to do whatever I want, not to be convenient for social. And so I let him play. And we were there for 4 years, and every time we got to the park, he would find these men and play ball with them. And Japanese culture, they give you gifts. And so if they give you a gift, you have to give them a gift. And so they would give him a hat. And so he went to a Japanese preschool. So he learned, the bowing and all the cultural, I don't want to say necessities, but the cultural niceties that, the respect and the bowing and all that. And so he would bow to them and offer them a truck. And of course, they have to take whatever gift he has. And then I told my mom about it. So my mom knitted hats for all these guys. And so Matthew would go and constantly pass out hats. Anyways, fast forward until we moved back to the States. And we're at a Home Depot because Matthew wanted a back to school party. He was entering kindergarten. He's like, I want a school party. And I was like, my thought was, what a great idea to get to know our neighbors, because we'd only recently moved in and we didn't know everybody. And so we were at Walmart getting a few supplies, and he goes, my friends, and he jumps out of the car with a soccer ball and runs over to this like homeless camp. And I was like, my friends, you don't even know these people. But in his brain, his heart has always been towards the homeless.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay. So we kind of went over there a little bit, and he's kicking a soccer ball around, and then he starts telling his friends, his people, about his little home party that he's going to have, and he's inviting them all and then telling them at 5, telling them how to get from the Home Depot to our house. And he was, for the most part, he was pretty right. I mean, he knew the directions and how to get to our house. And I warned him later, I'm like, honey, they may not come. And he's like, no, they're going to come. They're my people. I was like, okay, well, sure enough, one family came. It was a husband and a wife and their teenage, their 12-year-old girls and a 3-year-old little nonverbal autistic boy. Well, in that conversation, I naively gave my phone number and I said, here, if you need me, give me a call. They were living in their van. And that night, literally, she called at like 2:30 in the morning asking me, hey, can you come to the ER? I was like, okay, what's going on? Well, the ER wouldn't let her back, went to be with her husband because someone had to be with the kids. And so I was like, well, I went there and I sat with the kids. Well, then it was getting time for Mark to have to go to work.
This is the first day you met them, right?
Huh?
So this is still the first day you met this family.
No, this was the day after the party,
Okay.
Yes, the first day,
But it's
several evenings, but yes, so it's essentially the first day.
right.
And later we found out that that mom is actually the same lady that we had interactions with in England when we were stationed in England, but I didn't put the names together because she was with a different husband at that time. So I had met the mom and the twin girls along, like when they were babies, but kids change a lot from infant to 12, so I couldn't put them all together. But in that time, it was so Mark had Matthew at home, and so I'm like texting her, I have to leave, I have to take the kids home. Eventually I ended up just leaving and bringing him home, and we found out later that the dad had been discharged or transferred to a psychiatric hospital an hour away. Well, she just followed him in their car and didn't say a word to me because she was worried about him. So over the course of 9 months, so our first introduction to foster care was they just dropped them. I picked these kids up in the ER for help a friend, and she pretty much abandoned them and left them with us.
Wow.
And I still to this day don't understand. I cannot, as a mom, understand what mind frame she was in. That I'm just going to follow my husband and leave my kids with virtually a stranger.
Right. I mean, one birthday party, and
right
here you go. And so that ended up being a longer term thing from that point on, right?
It did. I mean, we had them for 9 months, but the twins had never been to American school. And so when I called CPS had actually told me, well, they left them with you. Mom thinks you're okay. There's 7 open cases. So if mom comes back and takes them, we're going to take them anyway. So better leave them with you. And I'm like, I don't know date of births. I can't, how do you enroll them in school? Well, thankfully, I mean, I know now that there's programs that kids would just automatically be enrolled and then you don't have to prove all the residency and all that kind of stuff. I did not know that then. And so then the kids the older 2 had been in El Salvador for about 7 or 8 years. And so they didn't speak any English or very little English. And their education, which, we had no idea what they had or what they didn't have. And so we actually hired a teacher that would come over twice a week and work with the girls. But then, the little boy was a nonverbal at 3, autistic. Well, it was, hard getting services. There's things like early childhood interventions and stuff like that help kids get on track that, whether it's poverty or abuse but you have to have a referral from a doctor to get that. Right. How do I get him to go to the doctor without insurance or Medicaid or I don't even know this kid's date of birth.
Right.
I know his first name was David. I don't know anything about, I don't know. So we eventually were able to get public health to kind of do some help. And I think CPS finally felt bad enough that they couldn't give me any custody paperwork because they didn't place them with us, but they kind of helped me navigate through some of the hoops of how to get his access and get him in. Well, then we finally figured out, long story short, we figured out where mom was, and mom was living in the van outside the psychiatric hospital. And when the police finally found, because we finally, between the twins and I, the 12-year-old girls, we had remembered enough of the license plate that they could find the vehicle. And Mark would go every day after work and go drive the hour to go visit Rob, the dad, and he would just sit with him and talk to him and listen to him and encourage him. And eventually, through all of this, Mark led him to the Lord. And then a couple weeks later, the doctor's like, "Well, you've completed everything. You're ready to be discharged. And where are you going?" And apparently, they wouldn't discharge you unless you had an address. So Mark's like, "Oh, they're coming home with me." So
So
we
I just
went
want
from
to, yeah, you didn't track them down to give the kids back. You tracked them down to love on them more.
well,
And
apparently that was
surprising to you thought, who knows? But Mark's take, hey, they need love. We're going to love and show the love of Jesus and share Jesus. And so they came home with you.
they came home, and then we had them. So we were raised. So our biggest aha moment was when we were raising the parents, but parenting the kids, or parenting the parents and raising the kids, however you wanted to phrase that.
Right.
And so the aha moment was, you know what? We could be much more effective in the entire family unit if the entire family unit wasn't in our home.
Right.
So,
How long did that go on?
9 months.
9 months of a family of 5 in your home.
Yes.
Wow.
So it was actually 9 months with just the kids, and then 9 months we had the kids in there for 18 months, but we had and then while had them, we were doing our licensing stuff to become foster parents.
Because this was
But
so
all we
easy.
needed to
This was so easy of a beginning. You just thought, hey, I better keep doing this, right?
Well, that and it was more so, okay, obviously God has given us a heart to love, and He's given us a heart to reach some, and it's kind of like that, verse in Matthew, whatever you've done to the least of these, society calls our homeless families and those that are on addictions and facing any of that, they're kind of treated like the least of these. They're treated with lack of dignity, lack of kindness, lack of support. And as we started to see this family, we didn't, both families have parents and brothers and sisters, but because they didn't make the choices the families thought, the families pretty much were like, "See ya, I'm out."
Right.
There was not any. I mean, I'm not saying just financial support. I'm saying like the emotional support of, "Hey, you know what? How are you fighting it today? What choice? And so, we were able to help him. So while they were in our house, we were doing the licensing class stuff to get to be foster, traditional foster parents. And, our dream, our goal was, since we have a large house and it was just, I mean, we had enough room to move a family of 5 in and still have our own spaces. Why don't we take large sibling groups and keep them all together? Well, that was our initial hope. Well, we couldn't do our home study as long as they were living in the house, because we couldn't pass a home study with them because of their own CPS issues.
Right.
And so we're like, we need to get you guys out. So then it was then we had to at one point, and this is where we learned and didn't know what we were doing. But our initial goal was to kind of get them clean and get them, we just did one little goal: clean and sober. Okay, now that you've been clean and sober for 90 days, now let's get you guys a job. I don't care where it is, what type of job it is, as long as it's legal, and let's get you guys a job. And then, okay, now let's teach you how to do budgets. I mean, because it's kind of hard to say, okay, now you're going to learn how to do budget and finances when you don't have any income coming in.
Right.
And you're not mentally and emotionally, it's kind of like, the hierarchy of how our kids learn. There's that grammar stage, then there's the dialectic, and then there's the rhetoric, the different learning styles of how they go. And at the grammar thing, you just get information. It's like our little kids that just memorize facts. They can tell you all sorts of facts. And then the dialectic is where they can tell you the reason behind how to, like at the early stages would be like when the 1773, when they did the Boston Tea Party, and then 1776 was when the Declaration, and then they can tell you the facts. Well, then the dialectic is, they can tell you the story behind it. That the king wanted them to pay this taxes and not have this, but they didn't have any authority in their government or any say. Well, then the rhetoric is the reason, the why. And so I don't like that. I want more. So this is how I'm going to put it all together and do it.
Right.
So with our families, when they're clean and sober, that's kind of like the grammar. They have to be at that base. They have to do that first before they can move on. So our goals quickly changed from, okay, now you're clean and sober, you have a job. Okay, now that you have a job, you need to put this much aside. Let's go open a bank account. Never had a bank account. Let's go. How do you have a checking account? How do you balance how much goes in and how much goes out? Just because it's on a card and you can't see the money in your cash doesn't mean you have an unlimited supply of money. And
Right.
so, learning some of that stuff, and then eventually we're able to get them in a townhome. And then, I think in the last decade, we've only helped them out financially one time in that first 9 months. They've
Wow.
been independently on their own since. They're still doing great. We're still connected with the families. We still, we were part of the kids' high school graduation, and then we actually took them to college when they went to college. We went to visit them at college. We've been a part of all of that since then. So in that hand, that was our eye opening of this is what it's supposed to look like. This is what this is what the body of Christ is supposed to come together around those that society says the least of these and say, okay, we'll be your anchor, we'll be your support. Let's get you from here to there.
Right. Now, if I'm remembering our conversation the other day, as amazing and really stoic of a story as this is, and thank you, God, for the redemption of this family and your guys' heart for it, is that something you would recommend? Is that sort of heavy involved? Okay, I'm just checking there.
I would love to say yes on be heavily involved with the bios as much as you can within certain boundaries. However, but I would not advocate to take them into your house and to, the secondary trauma that those kids are exposed to just by having mom and dad in the house. And, and I'm not a perfect parent. And I would say that probably you would say that you're not either. But our bio parents get to a point where at some point in their, when we were parenting the kids, I would just automatically, it's my house. They've been with me for so long. And then when the parent would try to come in and say, no, you need to do this, or it was a stupid request or stupid, like one of them was, you didn't make your bed today, so I'm going to cancel your birthday party. Okay, well, one was the expectation. Did that child know the expectation was to make their bed every day? If that parent hadn't communicated that, then you put it's almost like a form of punishment. It's like discipline wasn't because of a punishment. It was really because the bio mom didn't want to get up out of bed and go buy the birthday supply stuff. So she was going to make whatever she could to punish them to take that away. So then she didn't have to be the parent. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
So I would typically not encourage people to take in the entire bio family and granted Matthew was 5 at that point. So how did it impact, he was 5 and 6. So how did that impact him? He's like, well, I always had someone to play with, but when we first moved the husband and the wife in, we actually moved because our house was a split floor. The master bedroom was downstairs and all the other bedrooms were upstairs. So at that point, when we first moved that family of 5 in, we, for a short time, moved him down in our bedroom just because we didn't know him. And I'm like, I don't know how comfortable I am with my son up there. There's another strange man in the house that I don't really know. And I want to put him near my child.
Yeah, logical precautions,
So, no, typically I would not recommend, I would say be involved with the bios, love the bios, encourage the bios, but keep the boundaries.
Right.
And then I would also say not to have them in your house. You need your own sanctuary too. And the kid needs a safe haven and a sanctuary. And as long as you have that, then you can do a lot more. But the child that is in question needs a safe place as well.
Tell me the mindset. Did you have any sort of like anchoring mindset, obviously prayer, that when it got tough and when you would be frustrated with these parents, that you would come back to kind of help you stay the course?
Well, I try to do a mental health decleaning or decluttering every night. So whatever junk transpired that day between the bio parents or the kids and the bio parents, or even me and the kids, or even Mark and I for that matter, because fostering impacts marriages too. But whatever junk happened that day, I really tried hard to do a mentally decluttering and not take it with me and not carry it into the next day. I will also say that approach as much as you can with logic and not emotion, because our emotions derail us and take us all over the places where the logic. This is the fact. This is, mom has been sober for 15 days. how rational can she be at 15 days?
Right.
So prayer was a big one. Keeping the logic in mind was another big one. And doing a mentally decluttering of, okay, this kid reacted this way. Okay, God, how do I need to learn from this? What does this child need? But also, how can I not dwell on that and move it forward? Move it aside so that it can be fresh. Because if God says in his word, mercies are new every morning. I don't think that was just an arbitrary statement. I really believe he's like, okay, you made a choice yesterday, and maybe that new mercies every morning can also be, you made a choice 5 minutes ago, but you don't have to carry the shame or the guilt. And the difference between that is the guilt is I made a wrong choice. The remorse of the shame is I'm a bad person. So convincing our kids that shame they don't have to carry with them, because they probably have been told you're a bad kid. You're so stupid. Why can't you do anything right? That we want to change so that they can learn to be opening their heart to Christ and open their heart to new opportunities. As long as they're carrying that shame, they're stuck. And and the bio parents too. I don't understand what that mom did or why she did it. And I was complaining to my mom about I don't get why she doesn't. My mom's like, you can never understand her brain. She is a completely different person and operates in different, me abandoning my kids to strangers. I don't know if I could do that.
Right.
But I was not in her position. I had not walked in her footsteps. At that moment in her life, he was I don't want to say most important, but he was the one that had the critical fire that he had to put out at that moment. So in her mind, she could justify they were safe with me, so she could put out that fire here.
Right. One at a time.
You have
Hey.
you have to learn to look at it and from their what shoes are there, take it out of our lives, this is what I would do situation, and literally put ourselves in them. What were they thinking? How could they understand why this was the best decision to do?
Right. So I'm feeding your words back to you as I'm processing this. So part of what kept you anchored was your nightly, in a sense, a ritual, but nightly ritual of mental decluttering through prayerful processing.
Uh-huh.
And that helps you start afresh. Excellent. So if a foster parent or even the community, they're kind of interacting with biological parents of children who are in foster care,
Uh-huh.
what's one tip you would give them that you would encourage them with?
To interact with the bios.
Yes.
I would say don't be afraid to love them. Actually, let me back up. Deal with your anger towards the parent first before you can even interact with them, before you can love on them, before you can encourage, before you can do anything for them. You have to deal with your anger towards them. Because I get it. The choices they made that impacted our little blessings are horrible and hard. And we have an immediate anger towards them about why didn't you protect, or why did you hit, or why did you do this, or why did you sell your child, or whatever extreme or whatever decision that parent or series of decisions that parent made. Before you can do anything with them, I'm going to tell you, deal with your anger towards them. Because if you still are carrying that, you're not going to be an effective tool, and you won't be able to be the hands and feet of Jesus in that situation.
Right. So deal with your anger. And then you were saying, don't be afraid to love them.
Correct. I would still say you have to have boundaries. You have to.
Right.
You
don't
can't
move
just
them all in.
You don't move them in, but at the same time, the bios I don't necessarily. I mean, every case is a little bit different, but but my bios never had the opportunity just to stop by and drop by whenever they wanted. They had to, there were steps and things of when they had to. We eventually got to the point in most of her, not all, but most of her cases where the bios could come by and have dinner at the house with us and the kids. But that didn't happen overnight. That was months and months, like 10, 11 months into a case before they were, that was like almost to reunification when the parents would, and even then it wasn't just a stop by anytime. It was in a text with an arranged appointment, because I still have my family too. And anytime somebody comes in the door of my house, it sends some kids up, it sends them, the more kids you have in your house, the more that dynamic changes. And, anybody comes in, it's like, how many times, you have a few kids, anytime somebody calls you, how quickly do they want your attention as soon as you're on the phone?
Right.
Or, it's that same type of thing. So, some of that managed chaos or herding cats goes right out the window when somebody comes in the door. And so, and I had to be strong enough to say, you know what? Now is not a good time. If you need me, if you need to call, if you need to vent, okay, I'm available for that, but you're not coming home. You're not coming over right this minute. So,
Right.
but don't be afraid to love them, because in all honesty, our kids and our bios have probably never actually felt genuine love and support by anybody. And so they're trying to fill a void that really, truly only God can fill.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Ruth, for coming back and re-recording all of this. And I appreciate your time, appreciate the work you guys have done. And I know there are several more topics we'll have you on again, because there's a handful of things we can discuss with all of your experience. So appreciate you, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Fostering Bridges. We hope today's conversation gave you new insights, encouragement, and a reminder that you're not alone on this journey. If you found value in this episode, please share it with someone who might need it. And be sure to subscribe so you never miss an update. Remember, building bridges in our families, our communities, and ourselves is a continuous journey. Until next time, take care and keep fostering those bridges.